Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Inshallah, today we start Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, the very well-known book of Hadith. And I'll be going over what's called Mukhtasar al-Bukhari, the abridged version of Sahih al-Bukhari. It's available in English. And what does it mean to be summarized? Well, what it means is the following. Bukhari, the original book, has some 7,200 hadith, right? And of those hadith, there's about 5,000 or so that are repeated. Meaning, the 7,200 hadith or so that's in Bukhari is not 7,200 different hadith. Rather, there's a lot of hadith that are repeated. So the abridged version removes all of the hadith that's repeated. That's all it is. So you'll only hear the hadith once, right? So to make our lives a little bit simpler and to make this book not take way too long, we're going with the abridged version. Now, to better understand the method of Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he wrote this book, what was his goal, what was his intent? And the answer is twofold. His first intent was to have a conversation with the people of his time, right? So when you look at books of hadith, this isn't just a compilation of random hadith. He's not saying, okay, these hadith look nice and let's just put it in the book. No, there's actually a methodology that he's using. Each compiler of hadith, the major ones were the Bukhari, Muslim, Nisa'i, Abu Dawood, and this group of people, there is a philosophy behind it. And it differs slightly. So for example, Muslim is more fiqh-oriented in the way he presents information. So you'll find that he starts off with the various books of fiqh, the various topics of fiqh, from Iman to Salah to Zakah to Ramadan to Siyam to Hajj, etc. Bukhari, he looks at the primary conversations of his time, the topics and the discussions. So in his time, you had people discussing Allah's names and attributes. You had the problem of the Khawarij ideology, right? The extremist ideology. And you had problems with philosophies. You had problems with Aqidah, etc. So Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he's talking about these things. And the way he orders it is he starts with what he believes are which really are the more or the word is the less concerning topics or the less concerning innovations. Of course, all innovations are concerning, but some are more concerning than others. So he starts with the least concerning of innovations, and he ends with the most concerning of innovations, right? So he starts with Kitab al-Iman, the book of Iman. Why? Because there was this topic of, well, what is Iman? Are my actions part of Iman? Do my actions affect Iman? Now, the mainstream opinion is that yes, it does. When I do a good deed, it increases my Iman. When I do a bad deed, it decreases my Iman. Well, there are some who said that no, it has nothing to do with it, right? So he has a conversation around this. And when you read the book, you think that it's just random chapters and then hadith under it. No, he's actually talking to those people and saying, no, Iman or actions do have something to do with Iman. And he also tells us that actions aren't simply physical. There are actions of the heart. There are actions of the mind. And he goes through this. And he ends with the most problematic of innovations, that of the Jahmiyyah and the Khawarij, right? The Jahmiyyahs, those who had a very inappropriate understanding of Allah's names and His attributes. The Khawarij, who we know, people like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these guys who have their certain mentality where pretty much everybody's a kafir except this small group of people. I'm not going to go into details, but that's what's going on here. So in Bukhari, he writes the name of a chapter. Essentially, he's telling you, this is my position. This is my position. And then he's supporting his position with hadith. That simple. And remember, Bukhari isn't just another scholar. Bukhari is one of the most important scholars of all of Islamic history. And his method is what? I'm not going to speak. Bukhari is barely speaking. He only speaks in the names of the chapter, the names of the chapters. That's it. And then he says the Prophet ﷺ. That's it. That's his approach. And of course, this is the most authentic approach. Why? Because it immediately connects the reader to the Prophet ﷺ, to the source of revelation, which we want to try and do. Okay, so that's the concept of Bukhari. Now, the very well-known and widespread expression, أصح كتاب بعد كتاب الله البخاري. The most authentic book after the Quran is Bukhari. And some people say, what is this nonsense and what is that? No, and what does it mean that Bukhari's compilation of hadith is the most authentic? What it means is the following. Scholars, over the course of multiple centuries, hundreds of years of scholarship, which means thousands of scholars, analyzed every single hadith Bukhari put, along with the chain of narrators, along with how he put it, where he put it, etc. And the general, not the entire, but the general consensus is every hadith in Bukhari is authentic. Not every scholar said this. I got to make this clear. Some scholars said that every hadith in Bukhari is authentic with the exception of 35, with the exception of 20, with the exception of some, right? But the idea is it is through peer review that the scholastic community within Islam have made this statement. It's not just some random statement people said in order to appease, their own positions or something like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's analyzed. And to put it differently, when we say that Bukhari is the most authentic book after the Quran, we are not saying that nobody has the right to question what is in Bukhari. That nobody has the right to doubt and to analyze. We're just saying that if you do analyze it correctly, you will come to a similar conclusion, right? So this book is very renowned, very important to our hearts. So with that, we'll dive in, inshallah, and I'll start giving other bits and pieces of information as we go about the book and about the narrators and some other questions around hadith. So Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala begins the book with Kitab Bad al-Wahi ila Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the unit on how revelation came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Why is this even a question? In the Muslim mind, it doesn't matter to us. The average Muslim isn't certainly thinking, well, how do I know that really the Prophet ﷺ used to get revelation? And this is also the average Muslim's mind is not asking this question. We are very comfortable with the Prophet as our Prophet ﷺ, and we're very comfortable with what he says as being the truth. Where most discussion happens is, did the Prophet say this? And what did he mean by it? Which is very valid, right? Nothing wrong with that. But for people to come and question, well, how do I know that the Prophet actually received revelation? How do I know he's not just some crazy person who is hallucinating things? And you have some people who will ask that. Where? Normally non-Muslims, especially atheists. Right? They have to rationally explain everything that goes beyond the senses. So once I read something that what explains Musa's conversation with Allah in the desert, the Quran talks about it. When he was walking in the desert lost, he saw a fire and he went there and he started speaking to God and he became a prophet. An atheist or a secular or somebody who does not believe in the concept of prophethood, their explanation was the shrub or the plant that was burning, right? When it burns, the smoke is a hallucinage. What's the word? I said the word. No, it causes hallucination, right? So he went to the fire, now he's smoking, he's breathing in the smoke, and he pretty much got high. And he started hallucinating, so he thought, that's the explanation, right? And so to us, we find this funny, like, really, is that your explanation? Well, first of all, it wasn't an actual fire, it was nur, it was light that was coming out. But yeah, the Quran does describe it as a fire, right? Because that's what Musa alayhi salam thought it was. Anyway, not to go down that road, but nonetheless, it's a valid question. How do I know that this man who claims to be a prophet actually saw the things he saw? And that it's not simply a hallucination. It's not schizophrenia. It's not some sort of mental illness. Let's be real. If some person walked into this masjid and said, I'm a prophet of God, Gabriel has come to me, and God has chosen me and put the responsibility on my shoulders to call you all to this new faith called whatever, XYZ. What are we going to say to this person? You're crazy, right? So it's a valid question. So here, Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala answers that question. How did revelation come to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? But before that, you'll find that most works of hadith, in fact, most books will begin with the well-known hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. The hadith about intentions. Now, does this necessarily have something to do with revelation? No, I don't think so. I think it's just that the scholars feel responsible in reminding themselves and reminding the reader at the beginning of this journey or the beginning of the reading that you have to check your intention. Right? So Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala, or Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala says that he heard the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam say, reward is according to your intention. In other words, whether or not you get reward for what you do by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala depends on the intention you had when you did it. Right? Also, flip the equation. Conversely, it has another meaning. Right? Actions are based on intentions. In other words, you will act based on what you intend. To put it differently, psychologically speaking, the start of any action is the intention to do it. So if we are responsible for making sure that our intentions are pure when we do an action, if we want to actually do the thing, it starts with thinking about it. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِتَسْغَى إِلَيْهِ أَفْئِدَةُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ وَلِتَرْضَوْهُ وَلِيَقْتَرِفُوا مَا هُمْ مُقْتَرِفُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the equation of falling into sin. It starts off by actually entertaining the thought of doing it. That's how it begins. And the more you entertain it, the more the heart is ready to accept it. And when the heart accepts it, they actually do it. This is how it works. And even in secular realms, when it comes to working out, people, they understand the value of working out. They understand the importance of working out, but so little people do it. And even those who start to do it, most of them will stop. Right? So, well, how do I get around this? And the idea is you have intention. You make the intention to do it. You tell yourself, I need to start working out. I need to start working out. I need to start working out. Working out is part of my health. If I want to live healthier, I need to work out. Do I want to become, when I become much older, do I want to become dependent on a caretaker? I need to work. You see what I mean here? You keep telling yourself this. Eventually, the intention becomes strong enough to where the heart says, I need to go and work out. Right? So, same thing when it comes to salah. Somebody who never thinks of doing salah, doesn't understand the value of salah or the importance of salah, are they going to pray? The answer is no. And if they do pray, but they still don't recognize the value of what they are doing, or it's not in their heart that they need to be doing this, what's eventually going to happen? They're going to stop praying. Why? Because the intention is not there to start. And if there is no intention, then you're not going to do the action. And if you're doing the action, but the intention isn't there, you're going to stop doing the action because it is your intention that creates value for what you do, right? Now, the other side that I mentioned, whether or not your action is accepted is based on your intention, right? So you could have 5 people doing the same exact thing, yet one person is getting some reward. Person A is getting some reward. Person B is getting more reward. Person C is getting so much reward, you actually wonder, how is Allah giving him or her so much reward for such a simple act? And then person D is not getting any reward. And person E is actually getting sins. All of them are doing the same exact thing. But what's the difference? The intention. The intention. Let me give you a more specific example. Saying Subhanallah. Saying Subhanallah. When somebody is going about doing their thing and everything's a-okay, everything's stable, and they have their dhikr, they're saying Subhanallah, 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 their mind is kind of half there. Are they getting reward for this? Yeah. Inshallah, right? They're getting some reward. Versus somebody who, I'm going to isolate myself, this is my private time, I got to focus, and they're doing Subhanallah, and they're actually contemplating it. Of course, they're getting more reward. Versus somebody who has just gotten very, very, very bad news. And their reaction is to say Subhanallah. Like actually meaning it. What is their reward? Right? And somebody might be, in Arabic, and I'm sure in other languages, Subhanallah, it rolls off the tongue, right? It's just kind of something that's normal statements. They might not get any reward for that. And somebody might be tossed into hellfire for saying Subhanallah. How? Well, imagine a judge. And there's somebody accused of, let's say, murder. Right? And the one accused is innocent. And they're making their case. And there's somebody trying to get that person executed. So when the guy is making his case, the victim, or the one who's being framed here, is making their case. The other one wants to instigate. He wants to arouse the judge. And so as he's talking, he says, Subhanallah. Right? He's saying a praise of Allah, but his intention is what? To arouse the judge to get him executed. Falsely. So that Subhanallah will cause this person to get into hellfire. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Action are by intention. Right? So this is serious stuff. Now let me ask you a question. Imagine a young man or woman who wants to become a physician. Right? And you ask them, why do you want to become a physician? And they say point blank, I want people to call me doctor. I want people to see me as kind of like a higher part of society, higher status. Right? I want to make a ton of money, and I want to live a luxurious life. That's my intention for becoming a physician. Is that haram? No. Not at all. Not at all. You do what you want. Now imagine a young man or woman who wants to become a religious scholar of Islam, so that people call them sheikh or sheikha. Right? And they say, so-and-so is so knowledgeable, and they look up to the person, everybody goes to him or her for opinions and fatwas, and that's why they do it. What is this person's status in the afterlife? They are among the first to be thrown into hellfire. Look at the difference. Imagine, Allah might throw a scholar of Islam who spent their entire life teaching Quran and Sunnah correctly. Right? I'm not talking about an evil scholar, somebody who's misguiding people, somebody who's, creating problems. No, I'm talking about someone who's correctly teaching Quran and Sunnah. But they did it for no other reason than fame or status. This person will be thrown into hellfire. That's some serious stuff. But the doctor, no problem, do it, live your life, man. So the question is, well, why? Why is intention so sensitive? Right? Well, let's look into it. What is the word for sincerity in Islam? Ikhlas. And what does ikhlas mean? Well, let's look at the root. Khalasa. Khalasa means to do away with. to separate until you're left with the original thing or the very thing, right? So in Surah Yusuf, alayhi salam, when Yusuf, made that whole scheme where he got his brother pretending like he was stealing and all of that, right? Yusuf's brothers are now trying to convince Yusuf alayhi salam to take one of them instead of the youngest one, Binyamin, right? And Yusuf alayhi salam refused. And Allah says that once his brothers, they're like, man, Yusuf won't budge. What did they do? فَلَمَّا اسْتَيْأَسُوا مِنْهُ خَلَصُوا نَجِيًّا. Allah used the word ikhlas. When they saw Yusuf alayhi salam wasn't budging, khalasu, they separated from Yusuf alayhi salam to where Yusuf cannot hear what they're saying. Had a private conversation. Now they're alone, right? So ikhlas is coming from this word. Why? Well, essentially, sincerity is what, when we look at the root, we appreciate and we have a better understanding what sincerity is, a more practical understanding what sincerity is. If khalasa, it means to do away with, to remove, then sincerity in Islam is about removing from your life the things that come between you and Allah. That's what sincerity is, from a practical perspective. How do I go about doing it? Well, ask yourself the question, what is the thing that comes between me and Allah the most? Dunya, the world, right? Love of the world is the thing that comes between me and Allah the most. Okay, now that's a challenge. That's why Allah is constantly saying in the Quran, be careful of loving this world. Be careful of being deceived by this world. This world will end. So many verses. Why? Because it is the number one thing that comes between the Muslim and Allah. And therefore, it is the thing that creates the most insincerity. I mean, if Sulaiman alayhi salam forgot salah because he was distracted with his wealth. And he says, إِنِّي أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ عَنْ ذِكْرِ رَبِّي. I loved money more than remembering Allah in this moment. His dunya distracted him from Allah. So what did he do, alayhi salam? He got rid of his horses. Because he understood what came between me and Allah are my horses. So he got rid of it. So whatever it is, whether it's your dunya, whether it's your own desire, whatever it is, the idea is, what do I need to remove from my life in order to make that relationship between me and Allah pure, unadulterated, right? Now, some things you could remove. There might be certain things that distract you, like, let's say, coffee. I'll give you a silly example. You could remove this from your life, no problem. But you can't remove dunya in its entirety from your life. Nor are we asked to do that, nor did the prophets do that, alayhim salam. But what did they do? Instead of isolating themselves from dunya, they learned to demote dunya in their hearts. So it's not literally about removing something, not all the time. Sometimes it is, sometimes you can't remove it. You can't remove your family, although they are a huge distraction, right? Just the fact of the matter. But what you can do is, through Quran and Sunnah, adjust your hierarchy of priorities. What is my true end versus what are means? Money is what to most people? It's an end. They think that if I have money, then somehow, some way, I'll be happy. They think it's the end. When in reality, money is a means. It gets you somewhere or it gets you something. And if you don't have something important to spend money on, then what's the point? What is the point? It's money. It's just paper with some images printed on it and a number. If you have nothing to use it on, it is worthless. And if you have nobody you love to spend it with, it is meaningless. Because there's only so much you can feed yourself with before it just becomes depression. Right? So intention is what determines the value of what you do. It has nothing to do with the action itself, or it's partially due to the action itself. Now, if we were to look at this from a different angle, right? There's a very well-known motivational speaker. He's into business and organizations and whatnot. And he has a very, very popular book. It's called Start With Why. And the basic premise of his book is people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. So when you look at a commercial like Nike's commercial, they don't mention their shoes. They don't mention what they sell. They don't mention what you get out of their product. They don't mention like why you should buy the product. Rather, they mention why they do what they do. Right? And so you see all these athletes, among whom are those who are fighting against the odds. Like they don't have legs, yet they're racing in a marathon. Or they're missing something, yet they're a body, a heavy lifter. So what they're showing the audience is, this is why we make shoes. So that you can reach your goals. It has nothing to do with the what. Right? They might not even show you the shoe. They're just showing you the brand and why they do it. And that is powerful advertising. It's very powerful. Because why you do what you do is what gives value to what you do. So when you imagine two people doing salah, one is doing salah to Allah because they believe that it is in their best interest to do salah. And they believe that Allah's promise is the truth, that if I pray, He will reward me. And he believes, or she believes, that when I pray, Allah increases my guidance, and that guidance will help me navigate life. That is why I do this. They don't know much about what they're doing, like the fiqh behind salah, but they are very in tune with the why they do it. Now compare that to somebody who knows all the fiqh of salah, but they ask the question, why is this valuable? Why is this important? Why does Allah want me to pray? Like, I understand what I need to do, but why? These two people are in completely different worlds. Completely different worlds. Right? So, intention is so integral to the Muslim mind because, number one, you will not act unless you have the intention. Number two, you cannot continue to do those things unless you continue to have that intention. And number three, you cannot give value to what you do until you understand the why you do it. So, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. And for each person is what they intend. Now, we've gone over this before, but for those who maybe are only joining Bukhari series, right, I'll go over it again. And that is, there are different levels in terms of intention. Meaning, if we have this, like, this is the benchmark. This is the minimum point for an accepted intention. There are levels above that. Just like there are levels under it. Right? Levels above and levels under it. So there can be three people, all of whom have accepted intentions, but the value or the quality of their intention differs. It's not the same. And so, if somebody does something for the sake of Allah, and their intention is, the only reason I'm doing this is so that Allah doesn't punish me, that's it. Is that a valid intention? Yes. Somebody else says, the only reason I'm doing this is because I want Allah to reward me with Jannah. Is that a valid reason? Yes. A third person says, I am doing this because I want Allah to love me. I want Allah to be pleased with me. Right? Is that an accepted intention? Of course. Right? Now what if somebody says, the only reason I do this is because I want Allah to give me more of this world? To me, the afterlife doesn't matter. I am doing this because I want Allah to give me more in this life. Is this a valid intention?
I think so.
It's a tricky one, right?
This one and
What is it? Yeah, a person can ask for this life and the afterlife. We're just giving you examples here. This person says, the afterlife is not in my mind. I want this world. That might be it. But the question is it a valid intention? Meaning, this person hasn't done a sin. The answer is yes.
And he will be only rewarded in this
Right.
world, not the hereafter.
Sure. But is it a valid intention? The answer is yes.
Yes.
What's the evidence? Well, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever wants Allah to increase their wealth and increase their life, then maintain ties of kinship. So if somebody goes about doing it because they want more wealth and because they want more life, is that invalid? Absolutely not. It's valid. I said, is it invalid? I said, no, it's not invalid. Right? It's valid. The Prophet ﷺ said so. It's a promise of Allah. But obviously, someone who does it because they want to please Allah is way more valuable and with much higher quality intention than somebody who only wants this world. Right? So when it comes to the intention, you have this up and down. What you intend. Now, so it's not black and white here, but there is something that is black and white. And that is, who do you want it from? This is where intention either becomes approved or not. Right? In other words, the reason why having the intention of wanting from this world, from Allah, why it's accepted is not because of what you want, but rather who you want it from. So intention starts with who do you want your reward from? If it's Allah, it's a valid intention. But if it's from other than Allah, that's where the intention is invalid. I want to do salah because I want other people to praise me. That person is looking for reward from other than Allah. That is insincerity right there, at least at the basic minimum level, right? Now, sincerity is very complex. Very complex. And to be quite frank, it is borderline impossible to have pure intention. Why? Because no matter what you do when it comes to Islam, there's always an amount of pleasure that comes out of it. And so it always begs the question, did you do this because you want purely reward from Allah or because you find it fun or it's appeasing to you? I, like any Muslim, love going to Umrah. It is the only time where I can truly relax. It is the only time where I feel like I could just take it easy. The only place. So it begs the question, am I going for the sake of Allah to get reward? Or am I just going because this is my nice vacation? And no matter, let's be real, no matter how much I tell myself, no, I'm going only for, this is always there. And so I mentioned earlier that the biggest thing between you and Allah is the world. But this world, it's inanimate. It doesn't do anything. Rather, it's only about what you allow it to do. And the only reason this world is of value to you is because it pleases you. So in all actuality, the thing that comes between you and Allah the most is you. And love of yourself. And let's ask the question, can you really ever not love yourself? No, you can't. You can't. Unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you through certain situations that disconnects you from yourself. The human being cannot not love themselves. There's nothing you can do about it. Right? There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but when it comes to the question of sincerity, it's a big challenge. Right? And this is why the scholars and the Sahaba, one tabi'i says, I met 30 companions. All of them were afraid of hypocrisy. All of them. I'm not talking about the big hypocrisy where they're not Muslim inside. Rather, the hypocrisy of actions. Am I really doing this for the sake of Allah? That's what they were afraid of. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Riya, ostentation, right, insincerity, is as undetectable as a black ant in a dark night on a black rock. Can you hear its footsteps? You can't even see it, let alone hear its footsteps. Why is that the case? Because it goes back to love of yourself. When I pray my salah, when I recite Quran, it provides me with a tremendous amount of pleasure. So am I doing it because it pleases me, or am I doing it because it pleases Allah? And anybody who says, no, I'm doing it because it pleases Allah, does not know themselves. This is why the companions, the scholars, the more their iman grew, the more they realized this. And the more they realized this, the more fear they had of Allah. The more doubt they had in themselves. But that's the golden ticket right there, all right? That's how you know Allah is doing something, wants good for them, right? But the idea is you have this challenge. And the only way to get around is if Allah gives you sincerity. That's it. Sincerity can only come from Allah. Period. When you look at it from this angle. And that makes sense. Do you know why? Because what is sincerity other than a direct relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And do you think Allah is going to allow anyone and everyone to have a relationship with Him? No, Allah will only choose those who are pure enough to have a relationship with Him. Right? As one scholar said, Allah chooses who will be His neighbor in the afterlife. And He gets to choose who's going to be His neighbors. Right? And Allah will only choose people who are pure. So it needs to come from Allah. Can we get it? And the answer is yes. How? Well, you have some dua. So the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, right, to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika wa ana a'lam wa astaghfiruka lima la a'lam. Right? Oh Allah, I ask you, I seek refuge in you from associating partners with you, meaning doing things for other than your sake, being insincere in my actions. I seek refuge in you from insincerity while I know, meaning I seek refuge in you from being consciously insincere. And I ask you for forgiveness for my insincerity, which was unconscious. Right? And then Umar radiallahu ta'ala an has his dua that he teaches us, in which he says, Allahumma ja'al amali kullahu saliha wa ja'alhu liwajhika khalisa wa la taj'al li ahadan fihi shay'a. O Allah, make all my actions for you and make it sincerely for you and don't allow it to be for anyone else. So dua is how we can get sincerity from Allah. Another way is by doing good deeds. Meaning when you do good deeds, Allah rewards you for those good deeds by putting sincerity in your heart. It's like a drop. Every time you do a good deed, you get another dose of sincerity. The more you do it, the more sincere you will be, inshallah, bidnillah ta'ala. A third way is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put you through tests that will disconnect you from yourself. Right? So you hear all this, love yourself, you have to appreciate yourself, you have to celebrate yourself and all of this. Now, for psychology aside, when you look at it from purely a spiritual perspective, if you don't like yourself, in the realm of sincerity, you're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game. All right? So somebody, as the companions, when they look at their actions, they will look down upon themselves. They see themselves as inferior. That is a good thing. Now, we don't want this to become a mental health problem. That's another extreme. That's not what we're talking about here. What we are talking about is having a healthy amount of self-doubt to where you do not value yourself in a way that will make you insincere. Right? So these are three ways we can start to build sincerity. Actually, a fourth way is to want the afterlife more than this life. Why? Because only Allah can give you the afterlife. But in this realm, you feel that many people can give you this world. They can open doors for you, so to speak. So the more you love the afterlife, the more you want the afterlife, the more you value the afterlife and you devalue this life, the easier it is for you to have the intention for the afterlife. So these are 4 ways we can begin to build sincerity. Right? And then continuing the hadith, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى دُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever's hijrah, immigration, is for some world that they seek, or to marry a woman, then their hijrah, their immigration, is to what they immigrated to. Meaning you will be rewarded in terms of what you pursued, in terms of what you wanted. If you wanted Allah and His Messenger, then you will get Allah and His Messenger. If you want world, you might get that, you might not get it. If you want to marry, you might get it, you might not get it. Right? So intention also determines the end result, where we go. Now, why does the Prophet ﷺ mention to this world or to marry? Because these are the 2 things that are very difficult to do away with. Fact of the matter is, if a young man really, really, really likes a girl and wants to marry her, that is an impossible situation. How can you be sincere? You can't. All you can do is your best to try and suppress that insincerity, right? And this gets me to the final point, at least for today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands that there's only so much you can do. And He understands that, and for that reason, He does not hold us accountable for things that are beyond our control. Right? So as I mentioned earlier, the greatest threat to sincerity is yourself and love of yourself. But at the same time, you have no power to disconnect yourself from yourself. You don't. That's how Allah created you. And therefore, in Allah's mercy, He understands that we can never be fully sincere. So He'll accept from us regardless, even if we're not fully sincere. And number 2, what that means is insincerity will always creep in your heart. Always. Whether it's from yourself or from the shaitan. Shaitan might come and say, oh, yeah, you're here in the lecture now, alhamdulillah. Now they're going to say, she came and, right, I was here, mashallah, I'm a righteous person. Shaitan might whisper that. And when it enters the heart, you can't take it out. It's very difficult to take it out. So does that mean we're doomed? Khalas, we shouldn't come? No. Rather, what needs to be done, as Imam al-Harithi rahimahullah ta'ala says, at that point, you have to do 2 things. You're obligated to do 2 things. Number 1, to reject that intention. So it comes to your mind, I'm going because I want them to say I came. Right? You reject it. Say, no, that's not why I'm going. Now your heart might kind of skip a beat when you say, yes, they're going to. Right? You might not be able to shake that feeling. But what we can do is our thoughts. No, that's not why I'm going. I'm going because I hope Allah gives me some reward. You are able to do that. You're obligated to do that. And if you do that, you have fulfilled what you can and you'll get rewarded for it. See what I mean? So that's number 1. You have to reject that thought. Number 2, you have to despise the fact that it came to you. You can't stop it from coming, but you can despise the fact that it came to you. Like, I hate the fact that I even care about this. I hate the fact that my heart is interested in being seen by others. You can't change your heart, but you can change your thoughts, right? So these are the 2 things you have to do. And Imam Harithi rahimahullah ta'ala says, if you do that, you have done what you are able to do. Beyond that, you're unable to do it, and Allah does not hold you accountable for it. So, never be intimidated by the feeling of insincerity. And never not do something because you think you're insincere. Because that's another trick of the shaitan. That's another trick of the shaitan. Remember, sincerity is about doing. In order to be sincere, you have to do something. When you're not doing anything, you're not being sincere. Right? And part of sincerity is that challenge. To push yourself aside and to try and convince yourself that I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. So whenever you get those thoughts or those whispers from the shaitan, or don't go, or you're being insincere, or this and that, ignore it. Continue to pursue what you are planning on doing, but do these 2 things. Reject the thoughts, reject the intention, Number two, despise the intention. Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll go ahead and stop there. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.